Greetings, friends. Brett Ballinger, pastor of Prince of Peace Lutheran Church, Marlton, New Jersey. This is the lesson and sermon for the 5th week of Lent, 2020. We're in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and so we are worshiping in our homes and using technology and old-fashioned reading and prayer as our form of worship. So we bring to you today the sermon for this 5th Sunday of Lent, as we've been moving through the series of the first week of the temptation of Jesus, then the second week, the greeting of Nicodemus, and then the woman at the well, the healing of the blind man last week. And today we have the story of the raising of Lazarus. So I'd like to read that for us. The Holy Gospel according to St. John, the 11th chapter. There was a certain man named Lazarus who was sick. He and his sister Mary and Martha were from the village of Bethany. Mary was the one who anointed the feet of Jesus with perfume and dried his feet with her hair. And it was her brother Lazarus who was sick. The sisters sent this message to Jesus: "Rabbi, the one you love is sick." When Jesus heard this, he said, "The sickness will not end in death. It is happening for God's glory, so that God's only begotten may be glorified because of it." Jesus loved these three very much. Yet, even after hearing that Lazarus was sick, he remained where he was, staying for 2 more days. Finally, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea." They protested, "Rabbi, it was only recently that they tried to stone you, and you want to go back there again?" Jesus replied, "Aren't there 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk by day don't stumble, because they see the world bathed in light. Those who go walking by night will stumble, because there is no light in them." After Jesus said this to the disciples, "Our beloved Lazarus has fallen asleep. I'm going to Judea to wake him." The disciples objected, "But Rabbi, if he's only asleep, he'll be fine." Jesus had been speaking about Lazarus' death, but they thought that he was talking about actual sleep. So he said very plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sakes, I am glad that I wasn't there, that you might come to believe. In any event, let us go to him." Then Thomas the twin said to the rest, "Let us go with Jesus so that we can die with him." When Jesus arrived in Bethany, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Since Bethany was only about 2 miles from Jerusalem, many people had come out to console Martha and Mary about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, while Mary stayed at home with the mourners. When she got to Jesus, Martha said, "If you had been here, my brother would never have died. Yet even now I'm sure that God will give you whatever you ask." "Your brother will rise again," Jesus assured her. Martha replied, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus then told her, "I am the resurrection, and I am the life. Those who believe in me will live, even if they die, and those who are alive and believe in me will never die." "Do you believe this?" "Yes," Martha replied. "I have come to believe that you are the Messiah, God's only begotten, the one who is coming into the world." When she had said this, Martha went back and called her sister Mary. "The teacher is here, asking for you," she whispered. As soon as Mary heard this, she got up and went to him. Jesus hadn't gotten to the village yet. He was at the place where Martha had met him. Those who were there consoling her saw her get up quickly, and they followed Mary, thinking she was going to the tomb to mourn. When Mary got to Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, "If you had been here, Lazarus never would have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the other mourners as well, he was troubled in spirit, moved by the deepest emotions. "Where have you laid him?" Jesus asked. "Come and see," they said. And Jesus wept. The people in the crowd began to remark, "See how much he loved him." Others said, "He made the blind person see. Why couldn't he have done something to prevent Lazarus' death?" Jesus was again deeply moved. They approached the tomb, which was a cave with a stone in front of it. "Take away the stone," Jesus directed. Martha said, "Rabbi, it's been 4 days now. By this time there will be a stench." Jesus replied, "Didn't I assure you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took the stone away. Jesus raised his eyes to heaven and said, "Abba, thank you for having heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd, that they might believe you sent me." Then Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" And Lazarus came out of the tomb, still bound hand and foot with linen strips, his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus told the crowd, "Untie him and let him go free." Many of those who had come to console Martha and Mary saw what Jesus did and put their faith in him. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Jesus Christ. Well, here we are in the second week of our sheltering in place by the governor's orders and governors all around the country because of this pandemic. And oh, how things have changed so much in the last just 2 weeks. People being furloughed from their jobs, people being laid off, schools moving to instruction off-site in your homes through various means, some easier than others, so I've heard, to those of you unsure about paychecks and what comes next, to graduation ceremonies being postponed and many being canceled, proms being canceled, all kinds of changing of wedding plans, various things that have had to change and had to stop, have had to be put on hold or reconfigured. And then you're at home. We're at home with our families, spending a lot of time with them and dealing with various new challenges. If we have children at home, teaching, new challenges of spending so much time with our partner perhaps, under stress, right? So all kinds of things are changed. Things are not the way we had thought the end of March would be at the beginning of the year, is it? And then we keep hearing stories of and reports about the spread of the virus and people getting it, and the hospitals in areas of high infection being filled to capacity, and all the stories that go along with it. So all of this stuff creates fear, right? It makes it ripe for us to be afraid. But remember, fear is always about something out there. Fear hasn't happened yet. It's always something we make up in our mind about out there. So try not to let the fear overwhelm you. It will come, sure. There's another message that I gave about loving our fear. So I invite you to listen to that if that's something that's a difficult struggle at this time. But some of us with this change and life goals for ourselves or our children being put on hold or being certain milestones being canceled creates anger, right? Creates anger in us and frustration of, we work for this, we're waiting for this moment, and some of our young people graduating college and ready to enter the workforce, and what does that mean now? There's just all of this uncertainty and anger with that, perhaps. And so it's interesting, if you look at the anger, really what's usually behind anger, almost any kind of anger, is usually some deep sadness. Sadness that something did not turn out the way we thought it was going to. Something is not unfolding the way we thought it would. Think about it. Even in anger with your spouse, you get angry at your spouse. They didn't do something that you thought they would or should or could. Right? And so it's again about something else in the future. And so really, this time is really about a lot of grief. Right? We're sad when things don't happen the way we had hoped and planned, the way we had envisioned. Because we usually envision some really nice things, unless we're caught up in the fear thing, right? And then maybe not so much nice things. But we envision these things and they're not going to come to be the way we thought. But think about it. Is it life always like that? I mean, right now it seems to be exacerbated, compounded, right? But we always things never come out completely as we envision them or as we plan them. And right now there is definitely a big skew off the mark, you might say. But really, what are the things that we're grieving? What are we lost? What is the loss we're experiencing? An event that is not happening or not happening the way I thought it would or when it would? A milestone? Loss of money? Loss of job? Right, so notice there's a little weight here coming, right? Loss, perhaps, of a loved one. Just this week, this past Monday, I marked the 1-year anniversary of my mother's death and noticed that loss. And loss is painful, whether it's an event or whether it's the death of a loved one or the loss of a job. There's pain. Yep, there is pain. Life is not without pain. If anyone doesn't have pain in their life, send me an email. We all have pain. It's just part of what it is. It's part of the difficulties of life. And so we see in this gospel lesson that Jesus even weeps at the pain. He sees the pain of his friends grieving. He weeps at that and at their loss. And perhaps he's also grieving for his own loss of the one whom he loved, as the text says, his own pain at the loss of Lazarus. Now, I kind of wondered too, as I was thinking about this, why does he weep? I mean, if he knows what's going to happen, why is he weeping? Right? And I think he's weeping because, one, he experiences loss. He recognizes the loss that the world has, that we each have, and that he has, even in this case. I also think he weeps because he's maybe not exactly sure what would happen. He is God's only begotten, and he was pray to God for something to change, because we know that what God does, God brings life from death, will change things, but maybe he doesn't know exactly how that's going to pan out exactly. And so he's worried about his own expectation of what might be, and wrestling with his own sense of faith. He knows that God transforms loss, but isn't exactly sure how. And so that's our message for today, is to recognize that God transforms loss, but we don't know exactly how. Do we trust that promise that God transforms loss, but we don't know exactly how it will happen? Right? We've already experienced this in many ways in our lives already. Right? As we talked about, most loss is challenging how we thought something would be, how we thought it was going to take place, how we thought it was going to unfold, how we thought we were going to have control over it. Yeah. Never happens 100%, does it? Ever. Probably not even 80%. But God transforms the death of things, even the death of our ideas. And that's really what is the most of the loss that we experience. God can transform those ideas. God is calling us forth from the tombs even now, the tombs of death, right? The tombs of greed. Sure, we've heard the stories of the hoarding of toilet paper, but we've also heard of stories of many people coming and talking with one another and sharing with one another. Our own food pantry, under a strict safety protocol, continues to feed people who need food. Right? We see a people who are willing to share. Just this morning received 2 text messages from people outside the congregation. How can we contribute to the pantry? Right? This sense that we are in this together, transforming this, it's all for me and me kind of thing. And we're still going to have people out there like that. But more and more people being understanding that we must work as a community. All of us staying at home, there's a sense of community, right? Perhaps something else that will be burst forth from a tomb is a government that only focuses on the rich. Maybe the pain that it is in happening will convert people's hearts to change and be a government that supports especially the most vulnerable and supplies our medical community with the tools that they need to care for the sick, provides this education system with the tools and support they need to care and to help teach our young people what it means to be good, educated, thinking, loving, compassionate, empathetic people. Right? Perhaps a tomb that we're being called forth from, we're being called into more genuine community. I keep hearing people talk about sharing with their neighbors and talking with them. It's wonderful. People that they've never knew on their street before, and now that they're out walking, they're getting to know them. Calling us to share our resources. calling us to live more simply so that others may simply live. These are the tombs that God is calling forth from us. And just like the Lazarus story, God is saying, come forth. I'm going to transform your ideas, transform your minds, the renewing of your minds, Scripture tells us, the renewing of your minds so that, right, I can bring life from death. And so as Lazarus comes out of the tomb, he commands the others to help unbind him and to let him go free. And so what are the things that we must unbind and let go so that we can live more simply, that we continue to create community, that we continue to call those in authority and power to account, to care for the whole human body here, to care for us all? How do we untie those things that keep us caught in selfishness and greed? We're being called forth. And so as we're going to be in this situation for more time, for sure, here's a time. How can I unbind myself? And how can we help unbind each other from those things that keep us in the tombs of death so that life can happen? Life in a new way, that God can transform us, transform our loss into new ways of life and love. Thanks be to God. Friends, may the Lord God Almighty bless you, keep you, and enfold you in grace and peace. Amen.